Montana Territory, 1872. The first streak of dawn painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold, but Beatrice Valmont's heart remained as dark as the night that slowly retreated. At 22, she had already witnessed enough hardship to last several lifetimes. The frontier had a way of stripping away illusions, leaving only the brutal truth behind. Beatrice stood on the porch of her family's modest homestead, her chestnut hair loosely gathered at her nape, strands escaping to dance around her face in the morning breeze. Her simple blue calico dress had seen better days, patched in several places, but still respectable. The dress matched her eyes, deep blue and filled with a sorrow that seemed bottomless. "No man will ever truly know me," she whispered to the rising sun. The thought had become her shield, her protection against disappointment. Men came and went in the Montana Territory, rough, ambitious, broken men seeking fortune or fleeing their pasts. None had ever seen beyond her pretty face to the woman beneath, and Beatrice had decided none ever would. 3 years earlier, her parents had succumbed to fever within days of each other, leaving Beatrice to manage their struggling cattle ranch alone. Her 2 younger brothers had moved east to live with an aunt, but Beatrice had refused to abandon the land her father had loved so dearly. With each passing season, however, her resolve weakened. Cattle rustlers, drought, and crushing loneliness were slowly eroding her determination. "A woman alone cannot survive out here," the townspeople whispered when she passed. "It is only a matter of time before she loses everything." Perhaps they were right. The harsh reality of frontier life demanded partnerships, alliances, help. But trusting meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. Better to face the wilderness alone than risk another devastating loss. What Beatrice wanted was simple: to preserve her independence and keep her family's legacy alive. What she needed, though she would never admit it, was someone to share the burden, someone who would see her strength and her fragility and accept both. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. Visitors were rare this far from town, especially at dawn. Beatrice straightened her spine and squared her shoulders, one hand resting near the pocket where she kept her father's small derringer. The rider appeared around the bend in the road, silhouetted against the sunrise. Young and tall in the saddle, he guided his chestnut gelding toward her gate with the easy confidence of a man who had spent his life on horseback. "Morning, ma'am," he called, tipping his hat. "Name's Finnegan Lawson. I believe you might be expecting me." Beatrice frowned. "I am expecting no one, Mr. Lawson." He dismounted with fluid grace, revealing a frame that spoke of hard work rather than hard living. Perhaps 25 years old, with sandy hair and eyes the color of summer sage, his clean-shaven face bore the weathered look of someone who spent his days under the open sky. "Forgive me," he said, his expression genuinely contrite. "Did Mr. Harrison not send word? He hired me on as your new ranch hand." "Mr. Harrison had no right," Beatrice replied coldly. The banker had been pressuring her to take on help for months, insisting a woman couldn't manage the ranch alone. "I did not authorize this arrangement." Finnegan shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I rode 3 days to get here. I was told there would be honest work." Something in his steady gaze gave Beatrice pause. Unlike most men who looked at her with either pity or assessment, this cowboy seemed to simply see her. "Can you mend fences? Brand cattle? Break horses?" she asked, doubt evident in her voice. "Yes, ma'am, all that and more. Been working ranches since I was 12. A gust of wind brought dark clouds rolling over the distant mountains. The spring storms would arrive by nightfall, and Beatrice had 3 sections of fence down along the north pasture. Pride warred with practicality. "1 week," she finally said. "I will give you 1 week to prove your worth. Your meals and a place in the bunkhouse are included, along with fair wages if you earn them." "That is more than generous, Miss Valmont." She raised an eyebrow. "You know my name." "Mr. Harrison mentioned it," Finnegan explained, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Said you were as stubborn as you were capable." Despite herself, Beatrice felt the ghost of a smile form on her own lips. "Then Mr. Harrison knows me better than I thought." That evening, the predicted storm arrived with biblical fury. Rain hammered against the cabin roof, and lightning split the sky with blinding forks of white-hot light. Beatrice sat at her kitchen table, lamp burning low, reviewing her dwindling finances. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Finnegan drenched to the bone, his expression urgent. "The creek's rising fast, Miss Valmont. Your cattle in the lower pasture will be trapped if we don't move them now." "Now? In this storm?" "No choice. We wait until morning, you'll lose half your herd." Without waiting for her permission, he turned and headed for the barn. Beatrice hesitated only a moment before grabbing her oilskin coat and following him into the downpour. The next 2 hours were a blur of driving rain, frightened cattle, and shouted commands barely audible over the storm's rage. Finnegan worked with a quiet competence that Beatrice couldn't help but admire, anticipating problems before they arose and solving them with minimal fuss. When the last steer had been driven to higher ground, they took shelter in an old line shack near the upper pasture. Soaked and shivering, Beatrice watched as Finnegan coaxed the small stove to life. "Why did you come here, Mr. Lawson?" she asked, wrapping a threadbare blanket around her shoulders. "Montana Territory is a long way from anywhere." He poked at the fire before answering. "Same as most, I suppose. Wanted to make my own way, on my own terms." "And is that what you have found? Your own way?" Finnegan looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "Not yet, but I haven't stopped looking." Something in his honest admission touched Beatrice. Most men she encountered wore masks of bravado, claiming to have all the answers. This cowboy admitted to still searching. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the cattle. You likely saved my ranch tonight." "Just doing the job you hired me for, Miss Valmont." "Beatrice," she corrected, surprising herself. "If we are to be stranded in a line shack during a storm, you might as well use my given name." His smile was warm. "Finn, then. Most folks call me Finn." By the time the storm passed and dawn broke clear and bright, something had shifted between them, a small seed of trust planted in Beatrice's carefully guarded heart. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Finn proved himself invaluable, tackling the backlog of repairs that Beatrice had been unable to manage alone. With each fence mended and each broken tool fixed, the Valmont ranch began to resemble its former self. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day's work, Finn asked about the photograph Beatrice kept on the mantel. "My parents," she explained, her voice softening with memory. "That was taken on their 20th wedding anniversary, just 6 months before the fever took them." "They look happy," Finn observed. They were. Even out here, with all the hardship, they found joy in each other. Finn was quiet for a moment. "My folks weren't so fortunate. Father drank, mother endured. When he finally drank himself to death, she seemed more relieved than grieved." "Is that why you left home?" He nodded. "Promised myself I'd never end up bitter like him or broken like her. Figured the open country was as good a place as any to become a different kind of man." Beatrice studied his profile in the fading light. "And have you? Become a different man?" "I believe I have. Out here, a man is judged by what he does, not who his father was or what name he carries." His words resonated with Beatrice, who had struggled to define herself beyond the roles of daughter, sister, or potential wife. The frontier offered a strange freedom alongside its dangers, the freedom to recreate oneself. As spring warmed into summer, Finn's temporary position extended indefinitely. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts, and Beatrice found herself smiling more often than not. Yet with each passing day, she felt the dangerous stirring of something more than gratitude toward the quiet cowboy. One afternoon, while inspecting the herd, they discovered a calf trapped in a ravine, its mother bellowing anxiously from above. Without hesitation, Finn dismounted and scaled down the steep incline. When the ground gave way beneath him, sending him tumbling into the creek below, Beatrice's heart nearly stopped. She scrambled down after him, relief flooding through her when she found him conscious but grimacing in pain, his ankle twisted at an unnatural angle. "Always the hero," she chided, helping him to his feet. "Not trying to be a hero," he replied through gritted teeth. "Just doing what needed doing." Together, they managed to rescue the calf and get Finn back to the ranch house, where Beatrice tended to his injured ankle with gentle hands and stern reprimands about recklessness. "You could have been killed," she scolded, wrapping a bandage around the swollen joint. "Would you have mourned me?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes searching. The question caught her off guard. "I would have been inconvenienced," she replied, attempting humor to mask the truth. The thought of losing him terrified her in ways she could not acknowledge. July brought scorching heat, and the annual town social. Despite her protests, Finn insisted Beatrice attend. "You have worked every day since I arrived without a moment's rest," he argued. "One evening of dancing will not bring the ranch to ruin." Reluctantly, Beatrice agreed. She wore her mother's dress, a simple affair of lavender cotton that had been carefully preserved for special occasions. When she emerged from her bedroom, Finn's expression of appreciative wonder made her flush with self-consciousness. "You look beautiful, Beatrice," he said simply. The social was held in the newly constructed town hall, decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers. As Beatrice entered on Finn's arm, she felt the curious stares and heard the hushed whispers of the townspeople. Many had predicted her failure, expecting her to sell the ranch and move east like her brothers. Her continued presence and apparent success challenged their assumptions. "Miss Valmont," Mr. Harrison approached, all smiles and solicitude. "How wonderful to see you in town. I trust Mr. Lawson has proven helpful." "Indeed," she replied coolly, "though I still question your presumption in sending him without consulting me first." The banker's smile faltered. "Sometimes we must take matters into our own hands when we see a friend struggling." Before Beatrice could retort, Finn smoothly interjected. "Miss Valmont has the situation well in hand, sir. I am merely privileged to assist her vision for the ranch." His defense, delivered with quiet conviction, warmed Beatrice more than she cared to admit. Later, as they danced beneath the paper lanterns, Beatrice felt herself relaxing into the music and the secure guidance of Finn's hands. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the dance. For seeing me as capable, not as a burden to be managed." His eyes held hers, earnest and clear. "You are the strongest person I know, Beatrice Valmont. Man or woman." The night might have ended perfectly had they not encountered Thomas Blackwell on their way to the wagon. The cattle baron had been trying to buy Beatrice's land for 2 years, his offers growing increasingly aggressive as she continued to refuse. "Miss Valmont," he called, his voice carrying the slight slur of too much whiskey. "I see you have finally taken my advice and found a man to help you with that pitiful excuse for a ranch." Beatrice felt Finn tense beside her, but placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Blackwell, my ranch is doing quite well, thank you. And Mr. Lawson works for me, not the other way around." Blackwell laughed, the sound ugly and mocking. "For now, perhaps. But we all know a woman alone cannot last in this country. My offer still stands. Sell to me now, before winter comes and takes what little you have left." "The lady has declined," Finn said, his voice dangerously soft. "I suggest you respect her decision." "And who might you be to advise me, Cowboy?" Blackwell sneered. "Someone who recognizes when a gentleman should walk away," Finn replied evenly. For a tense moment, Blackwell seemed ready to escalate the confrontation. Then, with a contemptuous snort, he turned away. "Have it your way. But remember, Miss Valmont, when the snows come and the wolves are at your door, Blackwell Ranch will not be so generous next time." The ride home was quiet, both of them lost in thought. As they approached the ranch, Beatrice finally broke the silence. "Is he right? Will I always need someone to stand between me and men like him?" Finn considered her question carefully. "No man can stand alone forever, Beatrice. Not even Blackwell. We all need allies. Is that what you are? My ally?" He turned to her, his expression solemn in the moonlight. "I would be whatever you need me to be." The simple declaration hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. August brought the cattle drive to the railroad junction 40 miles east. With only 2 of them to manage the herd, the journey promised to be challenging. They hired 3 local boys to help, but the responsibility still weighed heavily on Beatrice's shoulders. If the drive failed, she would not have enough money to last through winter. On the 3rd day, disaster struck. A sudden thunderstorm spooked the cattle, triggering a stampede that scattered half the herd across the prairie. By the time they regained control, one of the hired boys had been trampled, his leg badly broken. "Take him back to town," Beatrice instructed Finn after they had splinted the boy's leg as best they could. "I will continue with the others." "That is too dangerous," Finn protested. "You cannot manage the drive with just 2 inexperienced boys. We have no choice. If these cattle do not reach the junction by Friday, we lose our place on the train. This drive is everything, Finn." The unspoken question hung between them. Did he trust her capability enough to let her lead? After a moment of internal struggle, Finn nodded. 3 days. Meet you at Cottonwood Creek on the third evening. If you are not there, I am coming to find you. I will be there, she promised. The next 3 days were the hardest Beatrice had ever experienced. With only 2 boys to help, she drove the cattle from dawn until dusk, snatching brief moments of sleep in the saddle. Her body ached, her hands blistered from the reins, but determination kept her moving forward. When she finally reached Cottonwood Creek, a day late, and with only 3/4 of the original herd, she was ready to collapse from exhaustion. Beatrice. Finn's voice reached her before she saw him, riding hard toward the herd. The relief on his face when he spotted her nearly undid her composure. I thought, he began, then stopped himself. The cattle look good. You did it. Not all of them, she admitted. We lost more than I hoped, but enough to make the sale worthwhile, he assured her, dismounting and approaching her horse. Come down before you fall down. You need rest. Too tired to argue, she allowed him to help her dismount. Her legs buckled beneath her, and Finn caught her against his chest, his arms strong and secure around her waist. I knew you could do it, he murmured against her hair. Never doubted for a moment. Something in his voice, pride without condescension, admiration without surprise, broke through the last of Beatrice's defenses. She leaned into him, allowing herself the luxury of being held, just for a moment. The cattle sale exceeded expectations, bringing enough money to see the ranch through winter with some despair. The ride back to the ranch was considerably lighter in spirit, with Finn regaling Beatrice with stories of his youth in Pennsylvania and his journey west. What made you stay? She asked as they crossed the familiar ridge that overlooked her valley. When your week was up, you could have moved on. Finn was quiet for a long moment. At first, it was the ranch. I could see its potential, what it could become with proper care. And later, their eyes met, and the honesty in his gaze made Beatrice's heart race. Later, it was the rancher. Before she could respond, the sound of gunfire shattered the peaceful evening. Bullets kicked up dust near their horses' hooves, sending the animals rearing in panic. Ride, Finn shouted, drawing his revolver and firing back toward the ridge where the shots had originated. They galloped toward the ranch house, bullets pursuing them until they reached the relative safety of the barn. Inside, they dismounted quickly, leading the horses to the back stalls. Rustlers? Beatrice asked, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing pulse. Finn shook his head grimly. Too deliberate. Someone was waiting for us. The implication hung heavy between them. Someone had known they would be returning today, flush with money from the cattle sale. Blackwell, Beatrice whispered, the name like poison on her tongue. Maybe, but we cannot prove it. Finn checked his ammunition. Stay here. I will circle around and— No, Beatrice interrupted firmly. This is my ranch, my fight. We go together. Their eyes locked in silent battle of wills. Finally, Finn nodded. Together, then, but carefully. They slipped out the back of the barn, using the gathering dusk as cover. As they approached the house, a movement on the porch caught Beatrice's attention. 2 men, rifles in hand, were attempting to force open her front door. On my signal, Finn whispered, I will draw their fire. You circle around, and, before he could finish, a third man appeared from around the corner of the house, his gun aimed directly at them. Well, the man drawled. Look what we found, boys. The next moments passed in a blur of violence. Gunshots echoed across the yard as Finn shoved Beatrice behind a water trough and returned fire. One intruder fell immediately, but the other 2 took cover and continued shooting. Run for the house when I tell you, Finn instructed, reloading quickly. I will not leave you here, Beatrice protested. Trust me, he pleaded. Please. Something in his voice convinced her. When he fired again, creating a momentary distraction, Beatrice ran for the house. She reached the porch just as a bullet splintered the wood near her head, driving her to the ground. Beatrice. Finn's anguished cry was followed by more gunfire. She crawled to the door, fumbling with the key with shaking hands. Once inside, she grabbed her father's shotgun from above the mantel and moved to the window, ready to provide cover for Finn. What she saw made her blood run cold. Finn was pinned down behind the water trough, one arm hanging uselessly at his side, blood darkening his shirt. The remaining intruder was circling toward him, rifle raised. Without hesitation, Beatrice threw open the window and fired. The shotgun's roar was deafening, and the intruder crumpled to the ground, clutching his leg and howling in pain. The sudden silence that followed seemed unnatural after the chaos of gunfire. Beatrice rushed outside to Finn, who was attempting to stand despite his injury. "You are shot," she said, her voice tight with fear as she helped support his weight. "Just grazed," he replied, though the pallor of his face contradicted his brave words. "You saved my life. You would have done the same for me." His eyes, clouded with pain but still clear with purpose, found hers. "Always, Beatrice. Always." Later, after the wounded intruder had been secured and the local sheriff summoned, Beatrice tended to Finn's injured arm. The bullet had indeed merely grazed him, but the wound was deep enough to require stitches. "Who were they?" she asked, carefully cleaning the torn flesh. "Hired guns," Finn answered grimly. The one still breathing confirmed it. "Blackwell paid them to ambush us. Take the cattle money." Beatrice's hands stilled. "He will not stop, will he? Not until he has my land." "Men like Blackwell believe they are entitled to whatever they desire," Finn said, wincing as she began stitching the wound. "But he has underestimated you." "Again." "He underestimated us," she corrected softly. Finn's uninjured hand covered hers, stilling her work. "Beatrice, there is something I need to tell you. Something I should have said before now." The seriousness in his tone made her heart constrict with sudden fear. "What is it?" "The reason I came here, to your ranch specifically. It was not by chance, nor was it entirely Harrison's idea." Beatrice pulled back slightly, wariness replacing concern. "Explain." Finn took a deep breath. "I used to work for the Territorial Marshal's office. Not as a lawman, but as an informant. They have been building a case against Blackwell for land fraud, cattle rustling, and intimidation for over a year." "You are a spy?" Beatrice asked incredulously. "Was," Finn corrected. "I was sent to investigate reports that Blackwell was pressuring you to sell, to document any illegal tactics he might use." Beatrice stood abruptly, putting distance between them. The betrayal cut deep, all the more painful because she had begun to trust him, to care for him. "So our friendship was part of your assignment? A way to gain my confidence?" Finn rose to face her, his expression pained. "No, that is not how it was. Yes, I came here with a purpose, but what happened between us, that was real. Is real. How can I believe anything you say now?" she demanded, anger masking the hurt beneath. "Because I resigned my position with the Marshal's office 2 months ago," Finn replied quietly. "I chose to stay, not for any investigation, but for you. For this ranch. For the life we could build here." Beatrice turned away, unable to look at him. "I want you to leave. Tomorrow." "Beatrice, please. Tomorrow, Mr. Lawson." First light. That night, Beatrice lay awake, tears silently tracking down her temples to dampen her pillow. Finn's revelation had shaken the foundation of trust they had carefully built over the months. Yet even through her sense of betrayal, she could not deny the truth that her heart had recognized long before her mind. She had fallen in love with Finnegan Lawson. But how could love survive deception? How could she trust a man who had entered her life under false pretenses, regardless of how his intentions might have changed? Morning brought no clarity, only the heavy certainty that Finn would be gone when she descended the stairs. To her surprise, she found him in the kitchen, arm bandaged but otherwise ready for the day's work. "I thought I asked you to leave," she said coldly. "You did," he acknowledged. "And I will. But not before I say what needs saying, and not before I know you will be safe." Before she could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Through the window, Beatrice saw the sheriff approaching, accompanied by a man in a marshal's coat. The next hour revealed the full extent of Blackwell's crimes. The marshal, a stern-faced man named Jennings, explained that the attempted ambush had been the final evidence needed to arrest the cattle baron. "Mr. Lawson's information was instrumental," Jennings said, nodding toward Finn, "though he insisted on resigning his post before we could complete the case." "Why would he do that?" Beatrice asked, avoiding Finn's gaze. "Said he had a conflict of interest." The marshal replied with a knowing smile. Something about developing personal feelings that compromised his objectivity. When the lawman departed, promising Blackwell would face justice for his crimes, Beatrice and Finn were left alone in a silence that stretched taut between them. "I should have told you sooner," Finn finally said. "I wanted to many times. But at first, I feared compromising the investigation, and later." He hesitated. Later, I feared losing you. You lied to me, Beatrice said, her voice barely audible. All this time. No, Finn countered gently. I omitted my original purpose for coming here, yes. But everything else, every word, every moment between us, was honest. More honest than I have ever been with anyone. He approached her slowly, as one might a skittish colt. I fell in love with you, Beatrice Valmont. With your strength, your determination, your heart. That truth has nothing to do with Blackwell or the marshal's office. It is simply the most important fact of my life now. Beatrice looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. She found only open vulnerability and hope. How can I trust this? Trust you. Trust what you know of me from these months together, he said. Judge me by what I have done, not by what I failed to say. She thought of all they had weathered together. The storm that first night, the fence mending, the cattle drive, the gunfight just yesterday. In each instance, Finn had proven himself trustworthy through actions, not words. I am afraid, she admitted, her voice breaking. Afraid to believe in this, in us, and then lose everything. Like I lost my parents. Like I nearly lost the ranch. Finn took her hands in his. I cannot promise we will never face loss, Beatrice. But I can promise you will never face it alone again, not if you will have me. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow but of release. The release of the fear that had governed her life since her parents' deaths. No man will ever love me, she whispered, giving voice to the belief that had protected her heart for so long. Finn's hand gently tilted her chin upward until their eyes met. I already do, he replied simply, the truth of it written plainly across his face. The winter of 1873 was one of the harshest in memory. Snow piled in drifts taller than a man, and temperatures plummeted so low that even the hardy Montana cattle huddled together for warmth. But inside the Valmont Lawson ranch house, a different kind of warmth prevailed. Beatrice sat by the fire, watching her husband of 3 months carefully whittle a small wooden horse. The gold band on her finger caught the firelight, sending sparks of reflection against the wall. What are you thinking about, Mrs. Lawson? Finn asked, glancing up from his work with a smile that still made her heart skip. About trust, she replied honestly. About how the thing I feared most became the thing that saved me. Finn set aside his carving and moved to sit beside her on the settee, his arm encircling her shoulders. And what was that? Letting someone in. Believing that love could exist even out here, where everything feels provisional and harsh. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Nothing provisional about us, Beatrice. We are as permanent as these mountains. Outside, the wind howled its winter fury, but it could not touch the certainty that had replaced Beatrice's doubt. Thomas Blackwell had been convicted and imprisoned for his crimes. The Valmont Lawson ranch was flourishing, with plans to expand in the spring. And in her heart, where loneliness had once made its home, love now resided. Tell me again, she requested softly. Finn smiled, understanding her meaning without explanation. I love you, Beatrice Valmont Lawson. I have loved you since that first storm when you rode beside me without fear. I will love you through every season to come, through every challenge this frontier presents. As the fire crackled and snow continued to fall outside their window, Beatrice leaned into the embrace of the man who had taught her that vulnerability was not weakness but the deepest kind of strength. The cowboy who had shown her that even on the untamed frontier, where survival often seemed the only goal worth pursuing, the human heart could still find its home in another.